Well, I'm John Peachy. Welcome to the People Mechanics podcast. As I always say, we will always be smarter than me. There are some smart people out there who've been in leadership for, dare I say, a long time, and really know which way is up. Interesting listening to Mike Hosking on News Talk ZB this morning, interviewing the Prime Minister on his weekly commentary. And Christopher Luxon was really just going through the numbers on poor outcomes across multiple sectors, which, I end up screaming at the radio. This is about bad leadership. This is about poor leadership. We really need to be having conversations, I think, about supporting our leaders, developing our leaders. Recently found out we have one of the lowest, if not the lowest, levels of input and resourcing of leadership development in the OECD. So the question would have to be asked, how's that working for us? Which is probably a rhetorical question. My guest on the podcast today, Traci Lidall. She is currently the principal of Waihola District School. I think I've got that right. When you read her CV, it is extensive. She has had probably a longer history than she probably cared to remember, I guess, maybe.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. The Tracy, welcome to the podcast. You certainly have had some skin in the game across multiple principalships, multiple schools,
Mhm.
multiple different types of schools too, sort of rural district schools as well as some urban schools, sort of districts and regions around the country. RTLB worked with the
Yes.
leading the resource teachers learning and behaviour, which is where I first met you, and I looked at the dates of that, and that frightened me. That was a that was a while ago.
Was. Yes. Yeah.
So I've been following your career, and I thought it'd be fantastic if we could have a conversation. So I really appreciate you giving me the time today. I know that principals are busy people, and the firefighting goes on a daily basis. I know that, but I wanted to ask you kind of an odd question. Research says that the most successful leaders have one particular skill that they absolutely master. They're really outstanding at. Yes, they've got to have broad skills, but there's often just a single skill that you are exceptional at. Is it sort of too impertinent and rude to ask you what do you do really, really well?
It's not too impertinent, and I would agree. And I probably think that it's people skills. I think if you haven't got that, it doesn't matter what other skills you've got, because you can't keep people walking along the track with you. So I think a good leader, a great leader, will have good people skills first.
Yeah, I like it. In fact, I could almost have paid you to say that because my view is exactly the same. Is that
Yeah.
we're in the people business, and
Yes.
there's a long line of people, as I always say, between us and the outcomes that we are required to deliver. And so, understanding people and working with people is critical. And education is no different to anyone else, is it? I mean, you're large communities. I mean, if you're in a reasonable sized school, not only are you dealing with students, you're dealing with sometimes a very large a mixed collection of staffing, of teachers, of experience. And then you've got the community and the parents. So if you don't know people, disasters can happen, right?
Absolutely. And when you get it wrong, and we all do from time to time, that's when things go really pear-shaped. If you misread a situation, if you misread a person or their response, that's when it all goes tits up, really.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's becoming more about psychology and understanding the nature of people, I think, than anything else. Last week, I was speaking at a conference, a principals conference in Rotorua, and I sort of very early on in the keynote presentation, I said, look, just I'll get everyone to stand up. They all stood up very dutifully, and then I said, just sit down if you acknowledge there may be some gaps in your leadership and some things to learn. And, thankfully, all 50 principals sat down immediately. And that's
Mm,
really healthy, right? It's acknowledging
mm,
actually that this thing is a
mm.
shifting sand dune, right? I mean, people is, it's a shifting landscape. Have you noticed, particularly post-COVID, if we're kind of post-mid, I don't know what we call ourselves now in the continuum, but let's say post-COVID, have you noticed that people have changed dramatically?
Yes, I think people are much more. Um, there's not so many fence sitters. I think people are either COVID deniers, vaccine anti one end and right wing one end, or they're completely left wing, look after everybody. We're all going to get multiple vaccines and trust the science on the other side. There is a lot more. talk, but there's a lot more talk at each other rather than listening to each other. That's yeah, the experience that I'm seeing.
Wow, that's actually a big and fairly concerning conclusion, isn't it? That we're no longer
Mm,
having the conversations. We're just simply,
yeah.
well, I mean, a saying that I picked up a long time ago was, you don't build bridges by throwing rocks at each other.
Hmm.
And I think there is a lot of rock throwing going on. I think that's difficult. We certainly there certainly seems to be yeah, us versus them mentality, which is just not helpful at all. I don't think. How did you find it as a principal during that period when I think completely unfairly, a lot of senior leaders had to let people go because they didn't comply or didn't want to comply with vaccine mandates and things? As a leader, how did that affect your emotional kind of well-being?
That it was really hard because, I mean, I only had to sort of put two staff aside working from home, let them go. Um, but there were staff who were actually really good at their job, and that's what they were there for. Um, so yeah, and then it becomes personal, and it's not personal. I was just doing the things that I needed to do, but there are a number of things that were put in place that made it quite, again, them and us. And that was awful, and it really did take a toll on them, on my whole leadership team, and on me.
Yeah, unfair, I think, isn't it? Now, it's interesting because I had you say not personal. I had a senior colleague a few years ago that would say to me, don't take it personally, don't take it personally. From my perspective, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. As a leader who's invested in people that we're talking about, how can you not take it personally? That would be my question. Or maybe I'm just strange, but how can you not take it personally?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are some people who can, have a really good separation, but for most of us, um, as soon and there is some sort of quote somewhere about, as soon as I don't take it personally, then I'm not invested at a level that I should be. If it doesn't affect me, then I'm probably not being effective. Um, so I I agree. I don't think you can leave that personal bit out of it. You have to take it personally, otherwise you're not invested at a level that you should be.
Well,
Yeah,
their outcomes are our outcomes, right? The outcomes of
yeah,
your teaching staff are our
yeah,
outcomes as the people who are leading the organizations.
yeah.
You can't separate the two.
Indeed. No,
And I
you
would
can't.
say that there is a
Yeah.
tension between, and I think this needs to be recognized, there's a tension between high pastoral care and high performance. These things sit
Yes.
in tension all the time. And I do believe that high performers know that they're well looked after, know that you have their best interests at heart, and see where they struggle, see what prevents them. And I would see that as a pretty key role of a senior leader, particularly in education, with
Mm.
the level of I'll use this advisedly, but the level of attacks on our teachers now, the level of attacks against the education professionals, because people have access to social media and all these tools to have a crack at you, and that's not that helpful.
Absolutely, it's not. It undermines, you see staff and they'll come in and they actually feel undermined, but they also feel um, undervalued. And nobody wants to be in a role where there is no value. Um, so it's one thing for us to say, it's all about the kids, and as long as you know that what you're doing is the best in the best interest of kids, then you can sleep at night. Um, but that only takes you so far, because if you're getting hammered on social media, politically, whatever, it really does take a toll. And I think it has a big part to play in the fact that 60% of our principals are in their first 5 years of principalship because they don't last. New teachers last 3 years on average and move on. So yeah, I think we all actually have to have a really good look at the way that the language that we use, the way that we support people, and the way that we have discussions and disagreements around what's happening. It can be, yeah, we don't need to always agree, but we need to come at things in a way that is supportive and positive and play the ball, not the man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. Yeah, play the ball, not the man. Interesting, some evidence stories coming out of South Korea, how their teachers are being attacked by parents, physically and emotionally attacked by parents who don't like the gradings because their kids are in such a competitive environment that if a teacher says something wrong or marks them down, they're targeted for quite vicious bullying, which is pretty shameful, really. I happen to know that and this is really, really bad statistics, but that the average life expectancy of a male principal that retires at 65 is a handful of years. I mean, the
Mm.
stats are just appalling. In any other industry, there'd be government inquiries over that sort of thing. So it's not fantastic. So as a principal, and you are an experienced principal, you've been there and done that multiple times over the years.
Mhm.
You've had such a broad experience. What currently sitting in Waihola School, district school, what is the greatest challenge that you face as a leader in this environment?
Oh, change is probably a big challenge, and I love change if it's going to make things better for teachers and students. Um, but change on the back of change for political gain is a real struggle, regardless. So what's been happening at the moment around maths, the misinformation about the data, we finally got. I mean, here's an example. We finally got an email yesterday afternoon to say that the new revised version of the maths curriculum would be available at 6 o'clock last night. So at about 20 past 6, I went online to open it and it wouldn't work. And then I get an email just before 7 to say that it's not working and it would be up again and running this morning. So the constant battle around not being able to do what we need to do for kids because we're battling IT, we're battling bureaucracy, we're battling incompetence, we're battling pay. I mean, I've been here in this acting position for 14 weeks now, and I haven't had a correct pay. So, Nova Pay is now called Ed Pay, but the problems still exist.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that is a huge part of my role that takes away my time to work with teachers and to work with students to ensure that we get better outcomes for students.
I think there are still teachers receiving counselling from the last Nova Pay debacle those years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
It is astounding, isn't it? I mean, things don't change that much in terms of salaries, right? I mean, there are salary scales. How hard can
yeah.
it be to get it right? And what does it say? And
Mm,
this is the thing for me. What we value, we put resources behind, and we get it
indeed.
right. So, what does it
Mm,
say about principals if you can't pay them correctly? Because at the
yeah,
end of the day, yes, there could be arguments over whether it's a calling or whether it's a job, but regardless of that, you deserve to be paid and paid correctly. And yeah, I'm sorry that that's happening. That's
yeah,
astounding. Interestingly, internationally, when you look at what people are requiring of leaders in this day and age, leading change, effectively leading change is one of the big calls on
mhm,
leaders. And I was just doing some change leadership coaching just recently, and talking about the fact that we might be excited about change. Change is great. Change is happening all around us, of course, all the
mm,
time.
mm.
But our staff can see change as a crisis.
Yes,
Particularly if it's multiple, and I think particularly in education, where the wheel turns and people say, "Oh yeah, we're back to phonics again, we're back to this again, back to that again," and would you observe this? Maybe this is a rhetorical question, but I mean the cynicism of our staff when another change is implemented.
absolutely. For young staff, I think it's not so bad because everything is new. But for staff who've been in the game for a while, absolutely. And I mean, I've got a picture of a staff member in my head I mean, I can imagine what he will be saying. We wait long enough, this will go, and the next flavour of the day will come around. And he's probably correct. Um, One of the things that really irritates me about New Zealand education in general is that we're really quick to pick up the latest, greatest thing and run with it and throw out everything that's come before. And there is no one size fits all. We know that. I've been in this game for almost 30 years. One size doesn't fit all. So why we think the latest, greatest thing is going to fit all, we know that it won't. So why aren't we adding to our kete rather than emptying our kete, getting a whole new one and finding it just doesn't serve a different group of kids?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that there needs to be some really stern conversation around that because, yeah, I mean, people come up with these great ideas, as I was saying, and I was describing it like a sports car. You might have a new sports car and the top's down and you're excited about where you're going, but often there's just a tiny rear view mirror and your staff are in that rear view mirror sometimes, and it's just not that helpful. But I mean, we have to accept change, but it's the way it's done, I think. And I'm coaching about the grief and the loss that people feel because we're creatures of comfort, right? We like what we
Absolutely.
like and we get used to it, and that gives us a sense of security. So, I mean, let's flip the script for a moment. Tell me about opportunities. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there's some negative things going on, but tell me about the opportunities. What do you see as the exciting things that potentially are coming up for education?
Um, I think I think we've got a much better grasp on neurodiversity. So I think kids who fit outside of the norm are better catered for and to than they ever have been before. That's not saying that we have enough learning support money to support them as well as we could be, but I definitely think that we've got a better understanding generally about quirky kids, neurodiverse kids, autistic kids, ADHD kids, dyslexic kids than we ever have before. So I think that is exciting. It's a challenge because some teachers now have, a class of 24 and 8 of them have got a diagnosis. Um, I don't think it's any different than it's ever been before. They've just got labels, and so there is an expectation rather than a different sort of need. Um, Probably the biggest challenge with that is meeting the expectations of parents because once you've got a label, generally it comes with a whole pile of recommendations from an expert that the teachers are then expected to, fulfill and can't. There aren't enough hours in the day and there aren't enough arms on a teacher in order to be able to do that. So that's the challenge that comes with the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife is a teacher, and I know that there are certain names that come home every night because those names have taken the time, and it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Juggling the time between those who are doing okay and don't really need a lot of input, but yet get neglected because there are kids, the abbreviation kids, as I call them. I think
Yes.
one of the good things though, and one of the positives of social media is the people like Elon Musk and other quirky neurodiverse people are certainly getting airtime, aren't they? Where kids can say, I might be really odd, but look, here's someone who's done fantastically, who's really odd, who doesn't fit the mold. And I like that. I like the fact that we're entertaining the idea of these people who've done and are doing, continue doing remarkable things. Um, so yeah, I think it is a challenge. But if I was to tip some time into your kite right now, if I said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'd love to give you some more time to do something, yeah, as a teaching professional, as a people leader, what would you get your head into if you had some time and space right now?
Um, oh, well, I mean, I'm one of those people that's got 100 ideas zipping around in my head all the time. I definitely think had I been, born now, I'd be diagnosed ADHD. And I think you'd find that probably 80% of leaders do. We're juggling lots of balls. And if we can do that, chances are we're on the spectrum in some way, shape, or form. Um, Probably my latest thing is looking at how we use mentors and mentoring within education. I don't think we do it very well. When you think back, 5 year olds want to be 8 year olds want to be 13, 13 year olds want to be 18. There's already those standards set up. So if we could be mentoring from those year levels, a whole lot of the behavior stuff that we are dealing with on a daily basis, I think would disappear. It would be a really interesting piece of work to do. That would really excite me to take that forward and see what that could look like.
Wow, that's a fascinating thought. I just literally had a conversation with the CEO this morning regarding the fact that if we just put an extra, and forgive me for saying it, if we just had an extra half an hour in the day, and in teaching that we could push our kids into something a little bit different, and stretch them where that would go. And I think you're absolutely right. I One of the stories that I share, which forms some of the coaching that I do, is a story about two dads talking about a football game. It's a very simple story, and it just changes our perspective on things. So two dads literally talking about a 10-year-old's football game. It's a real scenario. One dad says to the other dad, "How did your boy go on the weekend?" And the second dad says he scored 9 goals. It was a great game. And the first dad's like, "What? 9 goals?" He said, "How did he get to be that good as a 10-year-old?" And his dad said he spends 15 minutes extra after practice every night. And over that 12 months, it's 91 hours. So he's 91 hours better than the next boy or girl in the team. And
Mm.
it's such a great example, I think, that we can push in the right way. We can guide our kids into bigger and better things. And no, I love what you're saying. I think that's absolutely right. You just don't know until you give them the opportunity. But I like that. And if the problems go
Mm.
away, I think maybe you're inferring that there's a bit of boredom, that if these kids have some of it's too easy, and maybe that's what they get into trouble. I'm sure that's part of it.
Yeah, that is part of it, but also you can't be what you can't see. And for especially our little people, all they see is people like them. So they don't have those interactions with kids who are a little bit older. Um, it's a little bit different in small schools because they don't have other options. You have a 0 to 3 class and a 4 to 7 class, and that's just so they do have that interaction. But secondary schools in particular, everything is the same year level. So, and the year 13s don't mix with the year 11s and the year
Yeah.
12s, So having actually constructing deliberately some of those interactions might have an impact.
I like it. I like it. And I love your statement because it really applies to leadership. You can't be what you can't see. And I think that encapsulates leadership very nicely, as well as education, what you're talking about. Traci Lidall is currently acting principal at Waihola District School. She has a tremendous CV. And I'll be a bit bold and rude here. Look, if people are struggling in some areas, we've got wise heads who are sitting in positions around the country that they can offer support and advice and wisdom. And I won't give out your phone number, Traci, but I mean, my encouragement is look up some of the wise heads, the people who've walked the distance. We Maori call them the kairahi, those wise guides in our story. We need to be sharing that information, and there's such a resource sitting out there. Traci, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom. You've got some fantastic things to say. I just want to finish with one question, which will probably get you into trouble. If you could say just one thing to the education sector right now, if the microphone was on, there was no restrictions, what do you think you would share?
Um, I would probably say be transparent, be actually transparent. Don't tell us what you think your voters want to hear. Don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Be transparent.
Fantastic. That's easy, that's simple, and straight to the point. Traci Lidall, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Good luck with the temporary role at the moment, the acting role, and look forward to following your career wherever it's going to go.
Cheers. Thanks, John.
My pleasure.